guys, what is up? This is Matthew Davis, me once again, and it's that time of the year. 2024 is nearly over, and it's finally time for me to talk about my favorite games that came out during the year of 2024. I really had to catch up once it got closer to the end of the year because I didn't really play a whole lot of games, but then again, I canceled my GameFly subscription just due to the fact that a lot of the games that I did play from GameFly, I never really got to finish and mostly got frustrated with. So yeah, it was a lot harder for me to buy new games because now that I have my own place, it was hard for me to actually get to play or buy games at full price, especially since, a lot of games nowadays cost $70, but that's not the point. The point is I managed to play more than enough games for me to make this list. And hey, I was bound to anyways, but yeah, despite the fact that there were a lot of controversies and games that didn't live up to the hype, I still feel like there was more than enough games to work with to actually, manage to sit down and have fun with without having to worry about major drama or anything like that. Because isn't that what games are about? To just escape reality and just have a fun time? Well, most game developers nowadays don't really, give us that anymore. But, I feel like, with these games, they managed to do things right. For the most part anyways. But of course, before I get into it, there was one big game to come out this year that was one of the most popular and most talked about games that I did not get a chance to play, and that was Black Myth Wukong. I know a lot of people have been saying that should have won Game of the Year. I've heard from critics that it is pretty good. But, the fact that, the game, most people played it on PC, and I heard that version was better. I'm not really a PC gamer. I know it's on PlayStation, but the physical release didn't come till later on, and I'm more of a physical gamer. Sure, Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't have a physical release, and I just downloaded that digitally, but I don't know. I'm sure I would have had fun with the game. It's a Souls-like game with a compelling narrative, and I heard that's pretty much where most people got the enjoyment out of. I'm sure the game is fun. I'm sure it might have made my list, but I don't know. There were so many other great games that I don't really feel like it will live up to those if I did manage to play the game. But yeah, I'm not saying that I wouldn't play the game. I would, but that was a big one that I just didn't get the chance to play. As for the games that I did get to play, I finally get to talk about those. But of course, let me give a shout out to a few honorable mentions. These games I did play, I did enjoy, but there were just 10 games that I had more fun with. And those games being Helldivers 2, Dragon's Dogma 2, Persona 3 Reload, Stellar Blade, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, and one game that I'm actually surprised is even an honorable mention on my list, Call of Duty Black Ops 6. I know, surprising. I have a Call of Duty game as an honorable mention, but I actually did have fun with it. I think the single-player campaign is by far the best single-player game there has been in a Call of Duty game in years. Yeah, it still has issues. The multiplayer isn't really anything special, but I had fun with the zombies mode, and I did have fun with the single-player campaign. I really like how they managed to change things up a little bit by adding in a skill system, or sort of like a skill system, and I like the narrative that it had to tell. Sure, there were some annoying sections to it, but all in all, I had fun with the new Call of Duty game. Definitely a lot more than the last one, so I'm giving it an honorable mention. And now, for the games that did manage to make my list, let's talk about those. We're starting things off very strong. One of the most overlooked games, in my opinion, probably the most overlooked game to come out this year, Prince of Persia and the Lost Crown. Ubisoft has had a lot of downs this year, but this was one of its ups that most people just did not get to play. And that's a shame too. If you miss the old Prince of Persia games, which we haven't gotten one in a really long time, and we're probably not going to get that Sands of Time remake anytime soon, but with Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, fans would have definitely gotten a lot more had they actually got to play it. Prince of Persia in the Metroidvania style genre was an absolute blast from beginning to end. Creative bosses and great level design all around, plus fun challenges. It was all in all a blast to play. It was one of the earliest games to come out, and the fact that people just ignored it is an absolute shame because this was an absolutely fun experience, and I reviewed it on my channel if you want to see more of my thoughts on it, and I just had an absolute blast with it. We're probably not going to get another Prince of Persia game again because, despite its sales, it really deserved a lot more attention. And if you miss the franchise, it's an absolute must-play. At my number 9 spot is a game that most people did not have any hope for because this is trying to bring back a franchise that's been dead for years and a game developer that was once beloved, but, has just gone way downhill and just done nothing but, bring just crap to their library of games. But not with this game. This game actually managed to surpass most people's expectations. Silent Hill 2 Remake. This is definitely up there with the Resident Evil remakes, at least the first two and the fourth one. The third one was alright. And the Dead Space remake, which was another game that most people did not play, which is also a shame. But with Silent Hill 2 Remake, this game manages to keep the spirit of the original in every single way. It doesn't do anything to change the storyline whatsoever, always keeping you still engaged with its characters and its atmosphere. And sure, the puzzles sometimes can be a little bit frustrating, requiring a lot of backtracking, and the combat is alright, but for the most part, the game still manages to keep that horrific atmosphere of the original game, while also adding a little bit more to the storyline, making it even more compelling. I don't think this is necessarily better than the original, but I do think this is one of the best horror remakes ever. I am so glad that Konami managed to take inspiration from the Resident Evil remakes and bringing back one of the best horror games ever made with a new fresh coat of paint, and just all around being one of the best horror games to play during the Halloween season. I had an absolute blast with this one, and with the new addition of new endings, it adds in so much replayability just like the original game, and I highly advise you guys check it out. And I hope this sends a message that this is what we want to see if they do decide to bring Silent Hill officially back to life. If you had to ask me one video game franchise I would play for the rest of my life, it would be the Legend of Zelda series. And anytime I hear an announcement for a new Legend of Zelda game, I immediately anticipate it, and Zelda Echoes of Wisdom did not disappoint. The fact that we actually do get to play as Zelda this time around instead of just Link just adds in so much to the game that separates it apart from the traditional Zelda formula. The fact that the game has a heavy reliance on puzzle solving rather than combat does feel a bit tedious at first, but the game just got more better as the experience went on, and the puzzles ended up being more creative, and it was actually a lot more easier for me to figure out these puzzles, despite the fact that the menu is a bit tedious and gets a bit annoying to go through. I still feel like throughout your journey, with the amount of echoes that you do get, it just makes the experience all the more better. And while combat is on the lighter side, it still has some really fun bosses and some really intimidating enemies that I just had a blast fighting up against. And with the amount of side content that they added into, it makes it feel like it really separates it apart from Link's Awakening. It might not have the same value as Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, but it's still a blast for Zelda fans like myself, and I highly advise checking it out. I almost forgot this game came out this year, but I reviewed it on my channel, and I almost forgot about it, and I don't know why, because I had so much fun with this game, and I'm not really familiar with this franchise, but this game definitely makes me want to try those older games out. Tekken 8. I'm not really one for fighters that much, though I love Street Fighter 6, and the fact that this was probably a no-brainer for winning Best Fighting Game of the Year. Tekken 8 was an absolute blast for me. I loved the story mode and loved playing as the addition of other characters with their own storylines, and the fact that the combos were just so much fun. I'm not really familiar with the Tekken series that much, but I want to go and play those games, because if this is what they're like, the fact that, it has those iconic characters from the Tekken games, also adding the addition of new ones, it just felt like an absolute blast. It's one of the best fighting game experiences I've had in this generation of gaming, along with Street Fighter and Super Smash Bros., and I just had a blast all around, and I'm sure Tekken fans themselves have also stated that they had a blast with this one. And hey, if they do decide to do more, I'm all on board, because this game definitely got me hooked. Coming in at my number 6 spot is the first game I talk about that I actually didn't get to review on my channel because I played it much later on during the year, Animal Will. This is also a Metroidvania style game, though not really heavy on combat as it is more on puzzle solving. Animal Will is a very unique experience. The fact that, it doesn't really have much of a story to follow, though it is more focused on environmental storytelling rather than, having engaging characters and all that, but it was just all around a really unique experience. I will say, however, the lack of music is a bit distracting, because imagine the music that would be playing throughout this game, kind of like in the same perspective as Hollow Knight or Ori and the Will of Wisp. I feel like it really needed music, but still, the puzzle solving and the fact that, once you beat the game the first time, which will take roughly around 2 hours, there's still more content and more to the storyline after. It's like it's playing It's like you're playing multiple different games at once, and it's just a really deep experience that I just absolutely loved playing. And I didn't even finish the entire game, but I played more than enough to say it's one of the best indie games to come out this year. And it's probably one that not many people are talking about as much, at least not online from, the people I follow, but I highly advise checking it out. It's truly a unique experience that I'm not going to forget anytime soon. Probably the game I played the last. I actually played this during Christmas time. I actually wasn't sure if I really wanted to play this one, despite the fact that it gained a massive amount of popularity and people just cannot stop talking about it. I felt like, sure, it's only $15. I'll give it a go. Oh my god, I cannot tell you how addicted I was to Batro. Batro is a mixture of roguelite and poker. And I know absolutely nothing about poker. I don't know how to play poker. I never played poker in my entire life. But with Batro, I don't feel like I really need to, because this is more than enough. This is such a fun experience that I sucked at first, but I really, really got used to it more on what exactly I'm supposed to do. Basically, you're supposed to be like getting the most amount of chips during each round, and you gain more cards, giving you more abilities to gain more chips. It sounds boring at first, but as soon as you get into it, you just don't want to put it down. Sure, you're definitely going to fail a lot during your first time around, but I feel like it's one of those games that will definitely make you feel better the more you play the game. With the amount of cards you can get, the amount of different types of Joker cards to help you out throughout your experience when you play it, I just had a blast. It's one of those games that I just couldn't stop playing, even when I had more games that I had to play that I got for Christmas. I got my MetaQuest VR and all that. But Batro is a game that I'm so glad I finally got to play. And yeah, it's just as good as everybody is saying that it is. It's one of the most unique roguelikes that I played, and I played quite a bit of roguelikes. And this is one that I just had no idea I would enjoy as much as many others did. But I did, and I absolutely loved it. At my number 4 spot, I am a big sucker for the Persona series, and Atlas really knocked it out of the park with Persona 3 Reload. Could they do it again this year, but this time with a different game? Yeah. And they managed to do it with Ref Fantasia. I knew I had to play this game when I heard it's pretty much like the Persona games, Persona 3, 4, and 5, and from the creators of those games. So yeah, if you're familiar with the Persona series, it's definitely easier for you to get into this game. It certainly was easy for me. It does have some elements that separates it apart from the Persona games, like despite the fact it has a good amount of characters that were all very memorable, it had some really engaging storylines for them. You can't really romance anyone. Also, they don't have as much confidant ranking as from the characters from the Persona games, but it didn't really bother me, because what really makes this game stand out is the fact that, I was engaged with what the characters had to say in terms of their storylines, as well as the story itself. It was really, really engaging. And the combat, too. It definitely separates it apart from the Persona series as well. The fact that, it has that familiar turn-based formula while also having some combat elements in terms of, action if you want to, grind out your characters. Also, a good amount of side quests from time to time. The only thing is that it takes up a few days, causing you to progress the story a lot more later on. But I recommend doing the quests that have deadlines rather than just doing the ones that have no deadlines, because, I feel like those are far more the more important ones. But Ref Fantasia, it was a blast. And, this was great to play while we wait for more announcements for Persona 6, but hey, we're probably not going to get that anytime soon, but hey, this is still a great game to try out, and as far as I know, there will be a sequel, and if there is a sequel, I'm all on board. Okay, so technically for my number 3 entry, this is not a full game, it's DLC, but people have been putting this on their lists, and, the game was nominated for Game of the Year, so you know what, I don't care, it's my list, I'm putting it on. And Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is one of the best gaming experiences I've had all year, despite it just being DLC, but I can definitely say it's one of the best DLCs I played. It's by far the best DLC I played in any From Software game, and yes, people have complained about its difficulty, but I expected it to be difficult. Once I beat that final boss, I just felt so complete after beating all of these, major bosses that, caused me to get frustrated over and over. But the fact that there is more to this environmental story is just absolutely engaging. I enjoyed exploring the new world that Elden Ring had to offer, and I just loved, the new additions that they added to make your character even stronger once you go up against these bosses. It was all really engaging. And the new bosses, some of them are probably even more engaging than some of the bosses in, the base game. But that's not to say that the base game didn't have great bosses. Almost all the bosses in those games were memorable. And, the fact that, this never really felt like DLC. I mean, sure, it's shorter than the base game, but the fact that, it's $40, but, I feel like it's more than enough. It gives you more than enough to work with. The fact that there's more than 12 hours of content in this new edition of Elden Ring, it was just a blast. And it's one of the most engaging, experiences I've had in a DLC, and it never really felt that way to me. And I just loved it, despite oftentimes where I just wanted to give up on it. I did not give up on it, and I just absolutely loved the fact that, I get to play Elden Ring again 2 years after beating it the first time, and it just showed why I love the game, and it was great going back to it. I absolutely had a blast with it, and that's why it's my number 3 spot, and earns, because at least it's a game, so it counts for this list, and, it's my list, and I loved it. At my number 2 spot is a sequel to a game that I liked. I didn't love it. I mean, I almost loved it, but, the fact that we got this game now makes me love that original even more, or it's... can I call it original, since technically the first game was a remake and this is a sequel to that remake? But you know what I'm talking about. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth does so much more to improve upon it from its predecessor. The fact that, it has way more to the storyline, the second part to the original Final Fantasy VII, while also adding new elements like a much more vast open world and tons more content, and the addition of adding in new familiar characters that we didn't get to see yet, because, the first game was just part 1 to a 3-parter, and despite the fact that we have to wait for one more game, I feel like this game gives you more than enough. Hours upon hours of engaging combat and a vast open world and tons of quests to partake in. And the fact that, they have so many mini games that have frustrated a lot of people, including myself, but, it doesn't matter. You don't have to do all the mini games because, hey, the combat and the gameplay and storyline is truly where it's at. Square Enix has definitely shown what people want to see throughout this, trilogy of a remake to one of their most beloved games of all time. And despite the fact that we have to wait for the third game, I feel like there's more than enough to work with. Hell, this alone has far more content than the original Final Fantasy VII alone. So combine this with the first game, it just has a much bigger package, and all in all, I had a blast with it. And it's by far my favorite RPG to come out this year, and I certainly can't wait to see how this all concludes in the next few years. And here we go. My number 1 pick is probably a no-brainer, but there was not another game to come out this year that brought me in so much joy and so much nostalgia done right, as much as this game did, and it just reminded me how much I love being a gamer. Of course, my number 1 spot has to go to Astrobot, which won Game of the Year itself, and I think it rightfully deserves it. What's something that we don't really get nowadays? Nowadays, we usually get controversies and live service games and games that just have a heavy reliance on microtransactions, but developer Asobi has shown us why we love games. And we don't really get games that are just legitimately fun. I hear people complain that, how did this game win over Black Myth Wukong? Black Myth Wukong should have won because it had such a compelling narrative. Like, why did this kiddie game win? Like, come on, no way did this deserve it. Well, let me tell you, there was a time when games wasn't always about deep storytelling and narratives. Video games, the big thing that a game should be, if it doesn't have a good narrative, is to just be fun. Games like Banjo-Kazooie, Super Mario, Sonic, those games didn't really have major compelling stories to get into, but just managed to be so much fun. And the fact that there were times where it was fun to 100% a game, like, Donkey Kong 64 and all those other type of collectathon games. And the fact that this game manages to do nostalgia in a right way, the fact that it is bringing in so many of these beloved franchises back to life, bringing in why we love them in the first place, and just franchises that people just completely ignored, like Jack and Daxter and Parappa the Rapper and all those other types of games. I feel like this game, they just put in so much love and passion into this game that it's also adding in new content that is completely free, and it's a game that just feels remotely finished, and it shows what the PS5 is capable of in terms of the new controller, and the fact that we're living in a time where people just complain that the PS5 has no games. Well, with this game, we do have games for the PS5, and the game never feels repetitive. It feels like a game. It plays like a game. The Game of the Year Awards is called the Game of the Year Awards, and games are supposed to be enjoyable. Like, I always love when a game has a deep narrative, but it's just nice to play one of those games that are just legitimately fun games. And that's why I feel like it more than earns Game of the Year. So the fact that this won over Black Myth Wukong, I'm sure the game's good, but hey, I doubt I would have even liked it more than Metaphor or Final Fantasy, because those games had a lot more going for it. Well, I did hear the criticisms of Black Myth Wukong in terms of the gameplay, but I heard it's still good. But come on, I feel like, this just feels like a game, and people worked so hard on it, and that's why I feel like it rightfully deserves Game of the Year. Not just mine, but Game of the Year in general. Hell, I pretty much knew it would win Game of the Year, so I'm just saying right now, the people that are complaining, it won because it paid off. It's a game. It's fun. It's the game that's, just brought in so much joy for me. And I just wish we had more games like this. I had a blast from it from beginning to end, except for the times that I got frustrated with it. But hey, those were the optional stuff. It's a game that's never too challenging for people who want to just make it to the end of the game. And even the bosses are super creative. It has a great soundtrack, and just all around is everything that I love about video games, minus the story or the engaging characters. It never needed that. It was a game that just felt finished and just took me back to the childhood days of when video games just felt like games. That's why it won. And that's why it's my pick for the best game of 2024. There was not another game that brought me as much joy as this game. I love it, and I hope we get more games like it. And there you go. That's my list for my favorite video games of 2024. Let me know what your favorites were. So yeah, I have my best horror movies of the year list coming up, and my best movies of the year list coming up. I'm going to do my best horror movies first. I'm probably going to have that, I don't know, I'll try doing it tomorrow, but I can't make any promises because I still have other stuff I got to do. I still have to, edit my skit compilation for this year, and of course I got my, my monthly vlog for December, and yeah, it's just hard to believe we're almost in 2025, just a couple more days. It's unbelievable. Well, hopefully 2025 has a lot of new great games that it has to offer. I hope so, because we really need more games like these that I just talked about. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Word out.